It's time to set the record queer. YouTube comments leave a mixed mouthfeel. Welcome to Setting the Record Queer, a podcast where queer people talk about the pursuits and communities they love. This is episode 16, and it's about YouTube media analysis. My name is Alexis, my pronouns are it, its, or she, her, and I'm two of your hosts.
I'm Kaylee, my pronouns are she, her, and I'm your other host.
It's been like a month since we recorded an episode of this podcast. It's a really weird feeling.
Yeah, Aura's episode we recorded early, and this is one of the latest we've recorded, so...
It's so surprisingly easy to fall out of their routine. Like, you literally go like one extra week without recording a podcast episode, and the sun's like, how do we do this? What's this podcast? What's an audio?
Do I talk into this like cylindrical thingy, or do I just shout at the ceiling? Anyway, yeah, because it's been like I think about a full month since we've actually last sat down and recorded. We've done a bunch of things since our last episode. So first and foremost, the things that we mentioned on the podcast before, Calathon and Torathon have both come and gone.
I predicted the future. Literally 100% I predicted the future. Exactly what I said was going to happen in the Calathon race happened. I was behind D-Eddie by just a little bit because of the finery of movement, and then he could not finish Ridley's lair to save his life, and I won the race by literally 7 minutes.
Yeah, so those events were both a lot of fun. The World Ends With You, like doing that at like 12 a.m. with like Mr. Shasta and Leggy Starscream just making jokes about this like fashion-based JRPG.
The run was a nightmare and the stream PC crashed like 5 times over the course of the run, but dang if we didn't have a great time.
Won like 7 minutes overestimate, but that was mostly because of the crashes. And hey, speaking of speedrunning events, Speedruns Rochester is gonna have a mystery tournament soon.
This one is gonna be our biggest mystery tournament ever. We're actually like expecting such a turnout that we're actually doing the mystery tournament in teams of 4, and we, the staff, are planning a lot of like fun, unique stuff for the team dynamic of blind race speedrunning. So if you're near enough to the Rochester area that you want to come hang out for an afternoon, look for information on Speedruns Rochester's Twitter at SpeedrunROC long before the release of this podcast episode, so it'll be there by now.
So meanwhile, in terms of our Patreon, we're actually very close to our goal of being able to hire an editor for this podcast. We're currently, I think, $26 off last I checked, at the time of recording.
Something like that. It's not a lot.
It's not a lot, and there's something, I've mentioned this on Twitter, but there's something that we have a special episode for, which ironically I'll have to edit, because we don't have enough to pay the editor 3 times a month, but... that I'm really looking forward to doing, that we're keeping a surprise, and I really want to tell people, because it's a really cool idea that's honestly going to be as much work as editing the episodes are, if not more.
Yeah, it is going to be a 2-part special episode that's going to take place, the 2 parts will be recorded separately about a month apart. Patrons will get that first month part early. So you'll get to know the scoop. Everyone else is just gonna have to wait and see what's going down. I'm so excited. Also, like, we're planning on doing more special content once we have an editor. We just don't, we can't like give any concrete plans right now, but if we could like reduce our bi-weekly workload by like 6 hours a piece by being able to pay an editor, that would be wonderful. We can do more podcast content and everyone will win. So yeah, please support us at patreon.com/settingtherecordqueer. We're so close to that $100 line. Please help us pay an editor. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, last couple things to mention about the last month. We've played an inordinate amount of Final Fantasy XIV.
I have done nothing but play Final Fantasy XIV. I'm a washed-up retired speedrunner turned MMO streamer at this point. We started the questline to get married in the video game today, though, which is admittedly way more fun and way less stressful than the questline to get married in real life. Source experience.
And yeah, we're actually, that wedding will actually be on Wednesday after this episode comes out. And
Oh yeah, the day after this episode comes out, 5 p.m. On our streams. Come watch us get married in a video game.
yeah, if you want to watch our fake wedding, you can get an invite to our fake wedding.
You can't have an invite to our real wedding, probably, but you could have an invite to the one on the video game.
Yeah, I've been working more on that game that I've mentioned. I've officially titled the game Soul Sync. If you scroll back through my Twitter, I have about 10 seconds of walking through a city I made out of free assets, but that's fine.
It's coming along.
It is starting to come along. I'm getting really excited. I hope to have it done by the end of the year.
So yeah, that's an update on like an entire month of our lives. But you're not listening to this podcast for updates on how our lives are going. You're here for the like way cooler and more interesting people that we have with us. So with that, I would like to introduce the way cooler and more interesting people that we have with us, Sarah the Scrivener and Paige the Princess. Well,
Hi.
hello.
Hello. I am Princess Paige, and my pronouns are she, her.
And I am Sarah the Scrivener, and my pronouns are also she, her.
Hello. You two are pretty cool. We were watching a bunch of your videos over breakfast today
Thank you.
as part of research. We were having a grand old time. So like
They're really good watches. I recommend them to the listeners.
So the first thing I want to know is where that name came from.
Okay, so we were college roommates, and we had at one point been talking about doing separate YouTube channels, and then just decided that it would be easier for us to do one channel together since we lived in the same space anyway, and it would be less of a workload individually. And I kind of always knew that I wanted to do the princess thing, because that's...
Hey, princess branding buddies, let's go. Internet fist bump.
It's kind of always like been a thing with me. And so we decided to try to stick to like a medieval theme for the name, and you know, Princess Paige, the alliteration there. We wanted to go with something along the same lines for Sarah, and Sarah came up with Scrivener.
Yeah, we looked up a bunch of different sort of, nouns that would start with an S so that we could kind of keep that alliteration, because it's really easy for us. We don't get it that often, but we do have sometimes people say, like, who's the princess and who's the Scrivener? And it's like, well, let me tell you this really easy trick to remember it. Our names start with the same letter, and we did that on purpose. And yeah, Paige was always enjoyed Princess as a nickname. And we had looked at like Scribe and a couple of other things, and then we found Scrivener, and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. So, and all together, it sounds very good.
Scrivener has like a nice mouthfeel.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It's a good word.
I agree.
So we're giving your show a rating of good on the mouthfeel scale.
Excellent.
Thanks, yay.
Yeah. I would say that the Princess and the Scrivener earns a solid rating on mouthfeel.
But that brings us to the end of our mouthfeel segment that we do on every episode.
It's my favorite segment of the podcast, just so you're aware.
Thank you. I think it's going to be canceled after this one.
I love the part where we like talk with the words. The joke here is that the mouthfeel segment is the entire podcast because this is an audio medium.
Yeah, I got the joke. That's why we're canceling the mouthfeel segment.
Well, now moving on to the next segment of our podcast, the earfeel part, where you listen to us talk.
Oh God, that
Cancel
sounds
that,
worse.
Kaylee. Cancel that, I dare you.
Sounds worse. I want the mouthfeel segment again.
Okay, have you considered, our listeners holding their phones right now, maybe holding their foreheads in shame as they try to listen to this?
I'm mostly thinking about how many, if any, of our listeners are saying the Princess and the Scrivener out loud to test the mouthfeel.
Excellent. Free
I
advertising.
hope all of
Yeah.
Listeners, please do
Okay,
that.
but the feel of your podcast listening device is important.
Let's ask these questions that we wrote.
No, I want to talk about kinds of feels. Okay, that's fine. Let's get into like the mind feel segments of this podcast where we think about...
No, we're done with this joke.
I guess from now on, Kaylee will be hosting this podcast solo.
Yeah.
I've been kicked off.
Yeah, you're kicked off.
Find me on the side. Find me on the side show, Setting the Record Feels. I will no longer be participating in the main show because yeah.
Let's ask some questions instead of talking about feel.
No. Okay, yeah, go for it.
Funny thing, I told my dad that we were going to be doing this interview, and I'm like, oh, it's such a clever title because it's Setting the Record Queer. He's like, oh, like Setting the Record Clear. And I was like, yes, indeed it is. That is the second pun. And I didn't realize it until just now.
Well, I didn't realize it until just now, and it's my podcast.
Me neither.
Really?
For me, it was just like setting the record straight, but
Yes,
not
that's
straight.
what I thought of. So shout out to my dad.
Shoutouts to your dad.
The alternate, totally intended meanings passed on to us through divine inspiration by the goddess of podcasting.
All right, so I think we finally arrived at our first segment.
Yeah, now that we finished the negative 3th segment and the negative 2th segment and the negative 1st segment, we're at the first segment.
Alexis, you're making it very hard to reach our segment.
Well, you keep making me think of stupid things to say, so I have to say them. Kaylee, this is the cross I bear as a podcaster. I can't let these stupid thoughts go.
Well, anyway, how would you describe each of your histories with Disney movies in general?
25-year running history for sure. Just watching them forever.
We both grew up in Florida, so I mean, there's a certain amount of Disney that you just cannot opt out of in your life if you are like living in Florida for any given amount of time. I have been here my whole life. Paige moved here when you were pretty young, right?
I was 4, yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually like from Orlando for a time, and it was basically just sort of a point where like my family, my parents would just take me to Disney World every week because that's what you do in Orlando. You just have a pass and you go. So, and I mean, I've been watching the movies since I was a kid.
First movie I ever saw in theaters was Pocahontas. I was like a year and a half old.
How do you remember this?
I think mine might have been Lion King. When was that? That might have been before I was born.
That was 90, isn't that 94?
Maybe.
How do you people remember these things?
94. I was technically born, but not by much.
You might not remember seeing it.
I don't.
Or maybe you do.
I was just over a year old.
Let the record show that I have in fact silenced one stupid thought this episode thus far. 'Cause no. Okay, pop question. Best Disney movie, go.
Beauty and
the
the
Beast.
Beast.
Ooh, that was easy.
I was not expecting you two to have the same answer.
That's why we're best friends.
It's all about the movie picks. I watched like a solid 10 minutes of like the recent live action Beauty and the Beast with my dad when we were visiting. I don't really have strong feelings on it. It sure was a thing.
It sure was a thing.
It sure was a thing. Emma Watson was there, and the talking household objects were not nearly as cute anymore. But
We have thoughts. Did you in your morning in your viewing this morning, did you happen to stumble upon the week of videos that we did entirely about the Beauty and the Beast 2017 remake?
we did not, unfortunately. But I'm gonna have to go back and watch those after this
episode. I deliberately avoided those ones because we were on a limited amount of time, and those were a lot of videos. So I picked other ones.
We had a lot of feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We actually saw that in theaters together. Like, we made an effort.
Did you like bring your field recorder and do like live reactions in the
No,
theater?
We didn't.
But man, we had some conversations about it after the movie. I mean, even while it was happening, I would like lean over to Paige and be like, "What is happening?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this happening? Why is the Enchantress here? Why is she like this? Why does she have an owl? How involved in politics is she?"
I mean, owls are just good. Owls are just good.
Yeah.
I agree.
I would describe owls as a hoot.
Wow.
Yes.
Once again, we're at one stupid thought suppressed so far this episode. No more.
Wow.
Okay. So, continuing on the discussion of your history, where does your history with like video making and YouTube content, where does that go back to? And how did that happen?
Well, I actually went to a film program for high school, so I've been around cameras for quite some time. I didn't like do anything with it in college or anything, but I knew how to work a camera, and I watched a lot of like daily vloggers in college, and I just wanted to like do that at first, which is not what we ended up doing at all. But yeah, it was really just like a need to be seen, I guess.
And I'm just thinking, like, I'm having flashbacks to the YouTubers we said were our favorite YouTubers, like in our very first video, which was 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years ago. It will be our 5th anniversary this year on this October. I can't really remember when I started making videos, but I have always had an interest in video making. So one of the earliest times I can remember is definitely tending towards doing like video edits or projects when I could in school. Like if there was an option to do that, I usually opted to do that. I would make compilation videos from some of like, I used to take Kung Fu lessons, and I would put together like montage clips from practice. I had one of those flip video cameras, which had a USB that literally flipped out of the camera.
I remember those things.
Aren't they hilarious?
Someone on my timeline was talking about those the other day because I follow a bunch of retro technology nerds, such as Gravis, who you can hear from in episode 2.
Yes.
That was a lot of fun. That was a long time ago now. Holy crap. That was 14 sets of 2 weeks, give or take. I'll let you
7
viewers do
months.
the math on what would turn out to be 28. So someone on my timeline found one, and they like tried to pull the video for it. It was just completely corrupted, and it was just like, well, this is sad.
I imagine. But I always used to do those like iMovie, so actually by the time I got to college, I knew my way around editing, and I sort of had that sense. And it started me like back into it because there was a period of time where like I stopped doing videos and I started writing fan fiction. And before any of you try to find it, it is gone. It is no longer in existence. I will have you know, Paige writes fan fiction though, so you can find that. DM me for details.
Oh my god.
I would never do that. Yes, I would. But I stopped for a while, and then when I got to college, there was a time that same year where I did like a study abroad trip or something, and I did like video. I did vlogs as the assignment for this class. And when we got back, that I had enjoyed it so much, and it was something that Paige and I had already been talking about, like she said earlier. So we just sort of said, what if we did it together? So I've always had this interest in video editing, and I've always done it. I love it.
That's actually a pretty similar story to how Kaylee and I decided to do a podcast. Our story featured that yours did not. A lot of terrible ideas for podcasts.
We've already talked about this on the
Let
podcast.
me tell
though,
you.
So we don't need to go and do it again. Let's see. How would you said that you started with kind of the, vlog format, but you've kind of moved beyond that. So how would you describe it at present?
So it's funny, we didn't actually really start making video essays in the traditional way that you might think of it really until last year. So like when I say video essays, I'm talking about the kind of thing that like Lindsay Ellis, Lessons from the Screenplay, or Just Right does, where, they sort of have like a lot of film clips over it and there's a lot of voiceover. Sometimes there's face, but more often than not, it's just voiceover. We didn't really start doing that until last year, but before that, we had still been influenced by people who were doing media analysis on YouTube. There's a channel that I still revisit now called Critical Hit, and they stopped making videos a couple of years ago, but they did a very similar thing before like the rise of the video essayist YouTuber sort of took place. And we had a lot of fun doing just like reviews and sort of like, media studies essays where we would analyze certain things. It was particularly influenced in our early years by Tumblr, and I would say that the main reason that we started the channel in the first place was it was around the time that you were starting to see a lot of sort of like you were seeing the development of like marketplace feminism and feminism becoming very popular and a fun thing to talk about for everybody. And so you started to get a lot of people who were saying that the Disney princesses were just terrible, terrible role models for young girls, that Disney was very unfeminist. And as Disney fans, we kind of felt like a lot of those hot takes were very not nuanced. They were massive oversimplifications of more complex movies than people were giving it credit for. And that's kind of where that came out of. So a lot of our early work is especially motivated by just trying to kind of combat those very commonly held ideas about what Disney films say and what they mean and how they can be interpreted. So like one of the first videos I ever did was one about Ariel. So like there's this very common thing around that time where like a very common hot take was that, Ariel gave up her legs to be with a guy and that it was completely unfeminist. And I'm like, well, you're ignoring like the entirety of the first half of the movie if you really think that. It's very well established in the script and her I Want song that she wants to be a human before she meets Eric. It is just meeting him and saving him is just the push that she needs to finally make a choice to do it. A very bad, impulsive choice to do it, but a choice nonetheless, and that a lot of those sort of messages were just very not accurate. And so that was sort of our main motivation at first. But even then, I would call them essays in the sense that we had an argument and we had supporting points, but they weren't video essays yet in the way that the form has evolved over the last couple of years, especially. But that form we have started doing recently. And Paige really does a completely different type of thing than I do, and she does it very well. I'm not sure how I would categorize it, but I'll let Paige explain that.
I tend to look more at like specific trends, and I'm only like just recently coming into this realization. But I've done a video about how Disney has portrayed people of color, like characters of color, and how like a trend of turning them into animals to learn a lesson is kind of a muddled message after a while. And I just did a video a couple months ago about fat women being represented in rom-coms because of Isn't It Romantic coming out. So I tend to look more at, like I said, trends of things that are happening like over time in film and talk about why it's important to analyze those things and why we can move, like why and how we can move away from those things.
And something that I find really interesting about your specific style of video making is just that you have this way of kind of talking about these things in a very matter-of-fact way that I think is incredibly accessible to a lot of people. So like if somebody were to just like watch your Isn't It Romantic video, they might think it's just going to be a review, but you say a lot of super insightful things. And I'm very, very jealous, but like Paige is really funny. Like Paige is just very funny. Naturally, like I have to really write and think about my jokes, but Paige is much better at like doing stuff that's not entirely scripted. Like I have to script down basically to a single pause or to an expression sometimes when it occurs to me in the moment. But Paige is very, very good at something that feels like she's there with you and you're having a conversation with a friend, and she also makes you laugh. The one we're going to see in the performance showcase later is one that I picked because I'm like, it's funny. I don't know what the conclusion of that is, except that we have different styles. Like I go for more like kind of thicker, like academic focused stuff, but Paige does something different but similar that is also accessible. And I think that's one of the reasons that makes our channel kind of different is that, you know, we have two people who do very different sort of things, but they're still connected under the media analysis umbrella.
Those answers actually lead really, really well into our next question. So well that I don't think any of our viewers will, or any of our listeners will know that I wrote this question in advance and totally just thought of it based on your answers right now. So for your channel, how do you balance like media analysis and critique with entertainment value?
Well, at least when we first started, we had a much more strict schedule for ourselves because we were in school and because we only had a set amount of time that we spent together. So we would do 2 weeks of individual videos. Sarah would go, I would do a video, and then the third week we would do a video together. And I think that's how we kind of balanced that out then, because the third week was usually like we would watch a movie and just make running commentary, and that would be the video for the week. Or we would do like one of the YouTube challenge games, but like with a fun Disney twist, because that's who we were at the time. And I think now we try to do those kinds of videos whenever we can and we're together, but we're not college roommates anymore.
And as far as balancing critique and entertainment, I always sort of make my videos in the sense for the audience of like my parents, honestly, like, which isn't something I actually realized until pretty recently, like within the last year. It's not that I'm necessarily like, okay, mom and dad, your homework this week is to watch the video. It's more like my parents are people who are open to hearing these kinds of things. They're open to hearing different interpretations. They're both big readers, like English majors, and so they're kind of already open to hearing those sort of interpretations and like hearing the socio-political kind of ramifications of different media. And I think we've always kind of just made these videos with that kind of audience in mind. Somebody who might not be completely aware of what, we're about to talk about, but is willing to hear us. So like, that's very different than, like some other YouTubers, maybe like ContraPoints or HBomberGuy, who are kind of actively trying to convince people that very vehemently disagree with them that they might be on the wrong side. we keep our audience more in mind for people who are already going to sort of be in on the joke, if that makes any sense. So
I do like to approach it as if I'm talking to a friend, as if I'm talking to somebody that I know, maybe not super personally, but know well enough that I can have this kind of conversation with them and feel comfortable doing it, while also, you know, not expecting them to know every single detail of what it is I'm analyzing for them, kind of thing.
I still feel like we haven't actually answered your question. It's difficult to say. There's not like a particular like number or balance of like, okay, 20% is information and 50% is jokes, and then the rest of it is just whatever we want to do. It all depends on each individual script. Sometimes there are more jokes because I want to make sure that I don't make anybody uncomfortable. Like there's a video that's part of the showcase that is about disability and disfigurement representation in media. And that was something that I knew that I had to kind of tread carefully, because I knew that this was going to be territory that so many people were just not used to thinking of something as a marginalization, that I was going to need to make them laugh, and I was going to need to make them smile, and I was going to need to make sure that nobody felt like I was insulting them for maybe really loving a movie like David Lynch's The Elephant, or really liking Wonder. And that's something that we've always approached our videos with as well, like knowing that people get so connected to the media that they love that they tie it to their identity. And even when you very gently critique and analyze that, even if you come from a place of love doing it, like we love Disney, but we are also willing to look at the things that Disney does not do so well. And even when you come from that place of love, there are going to be people who are just going to take it as a personal attack. You say anything that is just not the highest praise. So I've always tended towards the side of I need to make people smile and laugh while I tell them these things, so that they're willing to listen to me and maybe think about it, you know, some other time if they can't handle it right now. But I think that's why it's always been important to us to kind of make sure that humor is an element, is like a tangible element in all of these things, especially because, you know, if we're deadpan and expressionless, like nobody's going to be interested. You have to make them laugh. And you don't want anybody to feel threatened by what you're saying. You want them to listen to you. And they're going to take you. They're going to be willing to listen to you if you make them smile. It's a very roundabout way of saying that.
I mean, we've said this on multiple episodes. Most of the time that we ask a question, we aren't actually looking for the answer to that question.
Okay.
It's the magic of interviews. But speaking of asking and answering questions, aka the format of an interview podcast, let's move on to our next question, which is also sort of directly related to the things you were just talking about. For the kind of content that you make in terms of like the actual information and words, you know, the information and entertainment, as we were just discussing, what's unique about your medium? Like, what affordances and limitations does it have that shapes the way you make your videos?
I mean, having somebody like basically read out an academic paper to you is much more engaging than reading the academic paper itself. Even if you're reading the captions, you still have the person behind the captions talking to you and telling you about this thing that they're analyzing, rather than just like reading through a 5-paragraph essay. I think it does, at least for me, come back to the whole friend thing. You feel like this person is accessible because you can see them. Whether or not they really are, that's another conversation about being on the internet. But I think just having somebody there, maybe not to like hold your hand, but definitely to explain something to you verbally, is a little bit more engaging than just looking at a block of text, pretty much.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that YouTube's biggest strength in like the video essay and the sort of like what we do, the biggest strength of that is the accessibility. So we, like Paige said, reading off like a 5-paragraph essay or like an academic paper is just going to be more engaging because, you know, you can connect with it. It becomes more personal just instantly by having a person attached to it. And there's also the fact that a lot of academic study is very, very hard to reach for some people. Like even people who go to college might not have learned about this particular topic. I mean, I think that's the wonderful thing about YouTube. Like there's tons of educational content that you can find. The wonderful thing about YouTube is that it is free. There's like YouTube Red and everything for the people that have that, I guess.
Is that still going?
But it is. I have never signed up for it.
I've never seen someone use it beyond the day it was released. Good job, YouTube.
I mean, I think a really big benefit is more just that And I think this is evident especially with, some of the YouTube like video essayist royalty. So like your Lindsay Ellis's, your Dan Olson's, like aka Folding Ideas, and like even H Bomber Guy to an extent, who have like more rigorous like academic background as far as like what they're talking about. Like Lindsay Ellis went to film school. Like she knows what she's talking. But what's amazing about YouTube is that she gets to basically write like academic level essays and documentaries. Like her Hobbit duology, which is really a trilogy set of videos, was like a documentary and video essay sort of mashup. And it was just nominated for a Hugo Award. Like that's how good some of the stuff that these people can write is. But what's amazing is that so many people who watch those channels would never, ever probably find like formal academic papers written about film criticism. And that is both good and bad, because on the one hand, have bad film criticism, of which there's a lot. But on the other hand, you can also have somebody like Lindsay Ellis or Just Right who are recommending, like, these are the experts, these are the books you should read. I have all of my sources listed here. This is what you can learn from me. And also I'm going to make fun jokes that you are going to find relatable and accessible and are going to make it easier to understand. So I think that this particular format is really good for just making sure that you reach people who might otherwise be turned off by the sort of academic pretense that is associated with more traditional sort of like film criticism. And I mean, I hope that the people who like watch us also read film reviews, but like I didn't until a couple years ago because I couldn't connect to it, because like what did those other people know? Like I needed to connect to those people who were writing those reviews really before I started reading them consistently. And I mean, now I do, but it took that. And part of that was influenced by watching some of those other YouTubers. So I think that is the biggest advantage of the platform itself, is the accessibility and ability to connect with your audience when otherwise that audience would not connect with the material themselves. I have a lot of thoughts.
If you have more of them, go ahead. Like, we are your captive audience. And our audience is also your captive audience.
Well, if you're doing your job right, you're also captioning your videos. You are making your content accessible in a way that academia is not always accessible to people with disabilities. YouTube does not currently have a system that is very efficient as far as letting people who have visual impairments consume the platform. Even their captioning system has a lot of flaws. I did a whole thread about it a couple weeks ago. You can't do italics, you can't do fractions, you can't do superscript or subscript. It's very, very frustrating because I'm a nerd and I want to be able to do everything in MLA or Chicago Turabian citation style, and I can't, and it bothers me. But that's not the point. The point is that you have that freedom to do that, and there are a lot of people that we are just able to reach that might not have access to that just because, you know, their school or whatever might not be willing to make accommodations for them. And if you're a YouTuber listening to this and you don't caption your videos, you need to caption your videos. You need to be doing that.
I really wish we had transcriptions for this podcast.
It's very difficult, and I recognize that.
That's going to be one of our next Patreon goals, is to be able to pay a transcriber, because we're not going to ask someone to do it for free. That's just not fair.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
That's something we really want to be able to do. And I feel the need to address that, because I feel it would be unfair to like sit here and agree with you and like nod silently when that's something we're not doing as much as we can. We want to do that. So support our Patreon. If you want those transcriptions, please. I hate being like, give us money if you want accessibility.
And we don't, at the same time, we can't afford it.
That's what's very unfortunate, is that in an ideal world, like, you shouldn't have to pay for that. Like, we have the technology available. That should be something that is innate within, like, I don't know, any of the streaming services that you guys post your podcast on.
Yeah, even just auto text or speech to text on literally any podcast platform would be cool.
So, what sort of community would you say there is, both in terms of YouTube video making and in terms of kind of the, type of thing you talk about?
Paige, you could talk about the way our comment section has kind of evolved.
The first video we posted, we were like, we're not going to have any comments. And I don't even think that we do now, or we may have 5 comments on that first video, whatever. But when we first started, we had like a very small, tightly knit group of people that came back to every video and would like have real conversations with us. And some of them we're still friends with on other platforms because we just have so many subscribers that it's really difficult to keep track of who everybody is unless they like make themselves very, very well known and aren't saying the same things that some of the other commenters are saying. Which isn't to say that I don't, appreciate the people that come in and say, "Oh, I like your videos," every video.
Or that we don't read them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Since we've been on YouTube for 5 years, our viewership has grown, sometimes not in a great way, and sometimes in an absolutely fantastic way that makes me the happiest person on the planet. I like interacting with comments a lot, and I find that it's easier for me to interact with the comments than it is for me to interact with people that are my peers for some reason. I don't think Sarah finds that to be the same, but
you're really great at replying to comments.
I love replying to comments.
I honestly get too much in my own head sometimes because there are obviously a different couple kinds of comments, and like you have the people who are like, "Oh wow, I wrote like this essay in regards to like what you posted," and I'm like, "That's really cool, but I have no idea what to say in response to this, but I read it and thank you." And to anybody listening, we really do read a lot of the comments. It's just that there are often so many that it is hard to keep track now. Like Paige said, we used to be able to, but then we got like a huge spike last year. We went from like 5,000 to like now we're at 32.
Yeah, it was like 5,000 to 15,000 to like 20,000 all within a month. Yeah. And then just like a slow, steady trickle upwards from there over the last year.
And it was a lot. And so we went very rapidly from like pretty much recognizing the majority of the people who would come and leave comments consistently, like from the beginning, to really not being able to keep track of, which is like, it's the disappointing thing about getting a bigger viewership. But it is obviously satisfying to have that. But I know that I definitely sometimes, and I know that this is ridiculous, I get nervous about having a good enough reply for some of these comments because they've put so much thought into it. I don't want them to like read my like one sentence reply being like, "Wow, that's really interesting. Thank you for watching." Like as, "Wow, that's really interesting. Thanks for watching." I don't want them to think that I really don't appreciate that they've left a comment. If you scroll down, you'll often see like, and if you follow different YouTubers, you can often go to their videos and see like other YouTubers who have left like very short, pithy comments, and getting better at that. But I'm not always great at coming up with clever, pithy comments to leave. Those are easier to read, and I think that's why a lot of people do them. But we get some really, really thoughtful comments. Then again, we also get a lot of people who, are driven by like response videos or, "Oh,
yeah.
Wasn't that video we did about Jewish representation was really fun?"
Oh, yeah. I spent a good amount of time weeding out anti-Semites from our comments.
Anti-Semites do love the internet.
Yep, and I'm Jewish, so it was, so much fun, I guess, is not a great word for it, but...
I've done the same thing, and no, that feel you feel is a feel I feel. And it feels pretty bad, so. But is there community among YouTube content creators specifically?
That I can sort of speak a little bit more to. I mean, Paige, you actually do your own thing as well. You can talk about Book Night Fest, but we went to VidCon for our first time 2 years ago in 2017, and we had a really great time. We met a lot of really cool people, a lot of creators like us who we are still friends with. We just went on a like Disney trip with some of them together like just last month, and then I went again by myself last year to sort of like network. Like my primary motivation to go was really to network, and I did. And again, I met a lot of other really cool YouTubers. And it's something that I'm noticing is just becoming easier as time goes on. Like there's a particular channel who, like the channel's name is like NerdSync. And that channel is run by a friend of ours named Scott, who I only just met like this last summer at VidCon. And we were like, wow, I can't believe the algorithm has never recommended our channels to each other because it's like our interests are so aligned. And I think that's certainly the value of being able to go to these spaces and meet up. I wish that there was like a Florida space to meet up, but there's not so much. This is the problem with the United States being so big. It's hard for all of us to get together. But even still, we forged a lot of friendships across this platform that I wouldn't really have expected us to, even just like this time last year. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to say some of these things without making it sound like I'm bragging, because I'm not trying to. But like, the first time we went to VidCon, there was just sort of this moment that I had where after a couple people that I saw whose like work I really admired, like Jessica Lee and Black Nerd Comedy, Andre Meadows, and like Jenny and Lorenzo, who's like a really good friend of mine now. I sort of had this realization, like just seeing them in person and like seeing like, oh, that's how tall they are. Or like, that's what they look like and that's how they move through this space. I had this realization that like, there are people like me. This is, which sounds like a very silly realization to come to, but fame is weird like that. You build up people in your mind as to be very, very intimidating. And then when I started talking to them and started like just meeting more of them, I was like, I shouldn't be thinking of these people as people to be intimidated by. I should really be thinking of them as my peers. Like, I don't have to be terrified of these people. And like, it's really just helped by not feeling like you don't deserve to be there. So our connection with other YouTubers has definitely grown, as not necessarily as we've gotten bigger, not like, oh, well, now you get into the 25,000 subscriber club, because we have tons of friends and tons of really, really incredible artists. Like It's Radish Time has like way less subscribers than us, but she's an incredible writer and she does stuff all the time with like the Vlog Brothers. And, you know, she gets invited to VidCon and she's super cool. And there's just lots of other people like that. YouTube is incredibly fickle as far as the subscribers go. It really is just luck of the draw. And we happen to get a little bit of that. So there's not so much like lines of the community drawn among like subscriber base. It really is more like, are we all going to get to be in the same room and maybe talk to each other like human beings? Because you'll be surprised. Like, I was following like Evelyn from the internets on Instagram last year, and I'm always really surprised when people remember my name if I meet them. And like, I met up with her at VidCon this last year, and she's like, hey, yeah, I know you. And I'm like, you do? And then we had like an hour and a half long conversation about like what our like career goals are. And now I'm like, yeah, she's my friend. And it's weird. It really all just comes down to like, as much as I still admire these people's work, you just come to the realization that they're all people just like you. And I love the YouTube community that we're a part of, and I love the connections that we have made, and I'm looking forward to making more. We're kind of hoping that we might get invited to VidCon this year. Not sure if it'll happen, but if we do, it'll just be another opportunity to be like, look, these are other people who are doing the same thing we do, that have the same passions, and that's how we're all connected. And people are always going to be a little bit different in person. Even Paige and I, like, our personas are pretty close, but they are still personas.
Okay, real talk though, I thought I had an internet persona, and then I realized he was an entirely different person, so like, maybe you want to think about that.
I have
maybe
an
not.
internet persona. It's not very exciting.
Anyways, what's it like being queer in the like YouTube circles, both in the like the creator circle and in the wider YouTube social sphere?
What's funny is like, I don't think either of us were like not out in our, we were both out in our lives for like the first couple of years we were on YouTube, but we didn't actually talk about being out until like 2 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's not like we were, you know.
It's hard to say. First of all, I'm not going to mention anybody in particular because that would not be cool, but there are a lot of queer YouTubers, and a lot of the people, like, I mean, there are just a ton more than I realized, and it kind of all goes back to like, I have so many queer friends, just unintentionally. Like, I don't really know if I have that many straight friends. Maybe I have 2.
Straight people exist?
I know,
Right?
It's weird. Like, I don't find them as often. Like, one of the subscribers that Paige mentioned, as far as like, you know, he started watching our videos like from the very beginning, like, is a friend of ours in England. And like, you know, he's queer, and we all just kind of found each other, and we're still friends. And we have a group chat on Twitter. But it was this sort of weird, so like, we're both bisexual. And I know for me at least, there's like a lot of baggage when I was younger and realizing that I liked girls as well, that I didn't just like guys, around like, oh, well, girls who are bi are faking it for attention. And I internalized a lot of that. So I didn't really start unpacking that until I got to college. And Paige and I were both kind of like, yeah, we're both bi. And like, we never really hid that on the channel. We didn't like make we didn't set out to be like, okay, well, we're going to make sure that we don't say anything that would make anybody think that we might be attracted to women. We never hit it, but then we eventually did do coming out videos. I did one after the poll shoot, which was, I think, the first time I cried in a video, which is something I generally try not to do. And I did that because even though I felt like a lot of our audience probably knew that we were both queer, like with that video, I just wanted to make sure that anybody who was as scared as I was after that happened, that like they knew that it was okay if they needed to be closeted, and that anything that they needed to do to keep themselves safe or whatever was fine. And that just because, you know, the people around you might not always be out all the time, or like maybe you're not to terms with it yet, like here I am, I exist. And it was a very emotional video, and then Paige did like a coming out video. Like,
yeah, I did 2 videos really close together. Both of them were not coming out videos. Only one of them was. And it wasn't even like I was telling everybody, I'm out now. I was really just like, may as well say it since it's just a part of me. I'll just have that out there. And then I, like, really, really closely after that, I did one about my BICONs. And I can't remember which one I did for Bisexual Awareness Month or Bisexual Pride Month, whichever one is the term. But I just remember it being around that time. And I just had 2 almost consecutive videos, if not consecutive videos, just talking about being bisexual because I wanted to.
Yeah. And I mean, that was something we knew.
Two ends of a gender spectrum, 2 videos. Bisexuality on YouTube.
There you go.
And I mean, we're both cis women. We're both cis bisexual women. And I mean, like, that was just always something that we knew about each other pretty early on in our friendship. We were like, oh, we have this thing in common. But yeah, we never really sought to hit it as much as just eventually let people know, definitely. And I mean, there are still people even, like, I think certainly part of that is I always kind of wanted to make sure that there was a certain amount of our personal lives that was not revealed on this channel. Just because, given what my parents do, I have seen up close the kinds of terrible things that can happen to you if you're not careful with your information online. And so we've always been pretty careful about making sure that, like, we don't give away too much. Even still, like, relationships did sometimes sort of come into play, but like, since we weren't like a lifestyle channel, we didn't have to talk a whole lot about us. Even now, like, we don't, even in our more casual videos, we don't talk about necessarily our lives unless we make the decision to. Like, there's never been a feeling of obligation to disclose anything about us. But our sexuality was something that we basically just wanted people to know because, like I said at the beginning, there are a lot of people on YouTube who are queer, but their audience probably doesn't know. And I respect that. I'm not trying to, like, shame anybody for not making a video about it, not being out to their audience. Like, that's fine. It's more that heteronormativity is a big thing, and most people will probably just assume that you're straight if you don't tell them. And we wanted to make sure that people knew that that wasn't true for us. And it also has an impact on the way that we look at media. Maybe we have some things to say about bisexual representation that maybe you should give a little bit of a different context to somebody who might be straight who talks about something like that. And I'm not saying that to, like, excuse any time we've said anything bad or unnuanced. More just that context can be really important when you're looking at media analysis. There are things that we as 2 white girls, like as 2 cis white girls, are never going to be able to give maybe the take that it deserves. And we try to be upfront about that, and we try to do our best, but, like, that's something that we feel is important to know for some of those videos. It's fine. We get people, I mean, we got people saying stuff about us being lesbian cat ladies before we came out, so people just do that on the internet, so it doesn't really matter if you're out or not. If you're a woman on the internet, it happens anyway. So,
I mean, as we all know, there are no straight people on the internet.
Yeah.
So,
But Sarah, how long did it take somebody to ask us if we were in a relationship? Because I know
Way too long.
You were
Way
like counting the
too
days.
long. I just want to say, Paige and I are like sisters, and like once we got tattoos, we have like complimentary Gravity Falls Disney tattoos. And
that's amazing.
Before we did that, we had a conversation where we were like, okay, we are blood now. Anytime that we have a fight, it is not going to break us up. We are family. Family works things out. You are my sister now. However, like, and Paige and I have never had really any attraction to each other. And we have talked about that like way before. But like, quite frankly, I'm offended by how long it took someone to finally just ask if we were dating.
Yeah, our next question, I have it written right here. Are you two No, I'm kidding. So how can someone get started in this type of content creation?
I actually had a question like this on a panel. I had a question like this on a panel at an event last year. It was a very small event. But
BookNet Fest.
Yes, BookNet Fest. But my answer was literally just do it. If you have an idea, you can, for your very first video, it's going to be terrible no matter what you do because it's your very first video and you should be okay with that, essentially. Just like pick up your phone, talk, and put it on YouTube. And then
no one's going to see it. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. And even if you decide later that you hate everything about it, there's a delete button on YouTube that is functional. So that's an option. But
it's one of the few functional things on YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, my answer is just do it. If you want to, it's free to do if you have the tools, and all you gotta have is, I was watching 8th Grade today with my mom, the Bo Burnham movie, and the main character makes YouTube videos through the Mac app.
Yeah, using the webcam on her laptop.
Yeah.
Which is how I started with some of the stuff that we did.
It could literally be that easy to just make a video that way.
Are there any like tips or tricks of the trade you wish you had known when getting started? Like the really specific stuff that you've learned over the past few years?
We didn't get microphones until like, what, a year and a half ago?
Something like that.
If you have a DSLR, you're using that, the audio that your iPhone will take through the voice memo app is going to be better quality than the built-in microphone on a DSLR. So if that's what you're using, use your phone too. And even if you don't have a DSLR, like the phone, like the cameras on so many smartphones are great. They're better than they were when we started.
Yeah. I have some older videos that I'm sure I filmed on my phone, and I can only tell because I would like hit my bed or something and the phone would shake. And that, like, the quality of the video and the quality of the audio otherwise were pretty good, all things considered, you know, it being very early in our YouTube career, I suppose. But it's really, it could be just that simple. Pretty much.
I appreciate your dedication to the pursuit of good audio quality as an engineer. As an engineer.
I mean, after we started using a microphone, like a shotgun mic on our cameras, YouTube's auto captioning guesses got a lot more accurate.
Yeah.
Like significant improvement.
And even like I did a video recently with my podcast mic, and the feedback is so, like, it's so much easier to work with this mic than the camera mic because the camera mic picks up so much extra ambient noise. I still love my camera mic, but this one here is just so clear and crisp. I love it.
I didn't really figure out how to do lighting until within this last year, but it's actually not.
Yeah, I should have taught you how to do lighting. I went to film school.
She brings up the film school thing when it's convenient.
I filmed a video with some friends. We watched a movie, and then we did a actually pretty long pros and cons list, essentially.
That was Sierra Burgess, right?
No, this was much more recently. This was for my Chris Evans project that I'm doing.
Oh, right. The Chris
Yes.
Evans.
So we watched a movie, we sat down, or we got ready to film, and nobody helped me set up anything. Nobody would help me with the tripod or the lights. Nobody understood what I was asking for as we were setting up, and I just stood there like, y'all didn't go to film school. That's what's happening here. None of them had any kind of...
Fun fact, most people didn't go to film school.
Very true.
Believe it or not.
You know, very true. I happened to be in a location where I went to a free film high school, but I didn't know how to ask for help even because they didn't know how to do what I needed them to do because nobody had any even YouTube experience. It was just me.
So you talked a little bit about lighting. What specific tips do you have about lighting?
3-point lighting. 3-point lighting kits are amazing. And if you can't afford them, use lamps with LED light bulbs.
And if you have glasses like I do, it's just very important to make sure that you just don't look directly at the light bulb. If you're sitting down, put the light above you so that you don't look at it, because then it's going to reflect off your glasses. And I have gotten comments on some older videos like, glare on your glasses is just too distracting. I'm like, I'm sorry, I need them to see. I mean, I get it. I'm not trying to single that person out. Sometimes I wear contacts and it's easier. But I mean, the lighting is a big thing. I would say that like my favorite videos that even we've done like years and years ago, like did a PNS watch for Sleepy Hollow, like in 2016. It was right after the Chilling Challenge, which was 2016.
Yeah.
Chilling Challenge was this thing where we did a video every single day of October. And that was a lot. And we watched the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow, which, I mean, the biggest regret about that video is that we were fawning over Johnny Depp because he was very young and he was not a jerk yet. We're going to redo that one, so we don't do that this time. But, I mean, the lighting is incredible. The quality is really, really good. And it's because we were sitting in front of a window. At the time, we didn't have lighting kits. But, I mean, the Descendants 2 one that that y'all probably watched this morning, that's part of the showcase, has not like a lighting system, but we used like a really strong LED like boat light that we borrowed from Paige's dad, and we like set it up on a tripod, and it looks amazing. So really just, it's going to take a couple tries for you to figure out what you like, but you will figure it out.
Yeah.
Also, the automatic settings on your DSLR can be changed to manual. Just switch it to manual. And then you can pick out the ISO and the aperture from there, and you can keep it consistent so that your lighting isn't going all over the place throughout the video if you just move around a bunch. That's something I've only learned embarrassingly recently that has been very helpful.
There's some things I don't remember from film school.
Cool. So you mentioned the Descenders video you sent us. So let's move on into the performance showcase then.
Yeah, so for this performance showcase, once again, we're bringing video into an audio medium, as is relatively common on this podcast, but we've got basically 3 clips from The Princess and the Scrivener YouTube channel. We're going to go through each of them one by one, a clip from each of you two individually, and then a clip of you two doing something together, and just kind of talk about, the nitty-gritty details of how these sorts of videos come together. So this first clip comes from before the feature on Burton Miss Day 5, and this is a clip of Paige. So take a listen, and the link to the original videos that these clips come from will be in the show notes.
First, I'm going to talk about Frankenweenie. It's Frankenstein, but instead of a monster made out of human parts, it's a dog that is crudely put together with like fabric so that a child doesn't learn how to deal with death. Right off the bat, I'm going to say that my biggest frustration with Frankenweenie the short is that Tim Burton has a title credit that says original idea by Tim Burton, and it is a blatant lie. There's a part in Burton on Burton that I was reading where he talks about how, for Frankenweenie specifically, it was important to him not to make any callbacks, not to make any references, not to be like, oh, well, we liked this from the original movies. You can't take the name of the character directly from the original thing and not give credit to the original author, Tim. He really just should have given Mary Shelley the credit she deserved, because, the movie really wouldn't exist if Victor didn't bring Sparky back to life. Victor brings Sparky back to life. And I love the stitches on Sparky because they are pretty much purely aesthetic. They don't seem like they're really serving a purpose other than to be like, hey look, he's Frankenstein, but he's a dog, because Tim Burton didn't want to do any callbacks.
So let's first talk about, this is your video before the feature, Burton Miss Day 5. This is one of your videos, Paige.
Yes.
And it is about the film Frankenweenie, which I've never heard of before.
No. So the first thing that caught my eye while watching this clip was the camera on the video work. I noticed that the camera was not static. It was zooming in, zooming out at particular times. So what sort of methodology was underlying how the camera was moving?
That is all done in post. It's all done in Final Cut Pro. I like to zoom in on my face when I'm making what I think is a very funny joke, to really like hone in the fact that I'm being very sarcastic and or ironic. Those decisions are actually also made as I'm editing. I don't tend to like visualize it beforehand. I don't put notes in my scripts when I go in. Sometimes I do, but mostly I just sit there and I go through my footage and I'm like, oh yeah, I think that was very funny, and I decide to just zoom in on my face really close to maybe make the viewer a little uncomfortable visually, but for humor.
You have a very good sense of how to do that. And honestly, I think you have a better sense of like how to cut in Zoom for comedic effect, you have a better sense of that than me. Usually when I finish a video, I will send it to Paige and she will give me some feedback. I'm like, it would be funny if you zoomed in on your face right here. And I'm like, you're right, it would be.
Yeah.
So another thing, well, I guess something I'd like to ask about really is, and maybe this would be a little more clear when I like sit down and watch the whole video, not just this like minute and 15-second chunk. Where did the inspiration for this specific video come in, and you know how do you tend to go about designing a video's script? Like, what sort of things do you look for when you're looking at a piece of media that turn into talking points in a video?
For this specific one, I had seen Frankenweenie quite some time ago, and I didn't, like I say in the very beginning of the video, I didn't want to let the whole series go without talking about at least Frankenweenie, but definitely like Tim Burton's short films as a whole. And then that became a monster of its own, so I picked 2 of them, and one of them I had never seen. So really, the script for this specific video just looks like bullet points of thoughts that I had as I was watching both of them. And I would add in little like quips or little extraneous thoughts as I was filming, depending on what I was thinking as I was reading my list. For a more structured video, I think Sarah would agree that we tend to stick with like an opening, introduction, and then the meat of whatever it is we're talking about, and a conclusion without restating absolutely everything.
Depends on whether or not you have a thesis. And
exactly.
This one, you didn't really have a thesis.
This one was really just my thoughts as I was watching these 2 short films, and then my thoughts as I was reading my thoughts on the short film itself.
Yeah, that's a type of video that Paige does very, very well. The comedic list and the running commentary sort of packaged along with some analysis as well.
I find that when I have lists, I'm able to like think about what it is that I've seen beyond what I've written down, so that when I come back to it, I'm like, oh, I didn't even put that in here, but it's still pretty relevant to what I'm talking about. I may as well say it, even if it's not in my notes or anything. So,
final question. You already sort of answered this, so like if you have no more thoughts, that's fine. But Paige, what makes your videos for the channel unique or special?
Definitely just the humor that I fly with, I guess. It's much easier for me to be funny in the moment than it is for me to like write down jokes. I don't think I could ever be a stand-up comedian, although I guess I'm better at improv than I think I am. So I'll give myself credit for that.
I mean, based on the clip we just listened to, I think you're pretty good at being a sit-down comedian.
Oh, yes, exactly. There we go. Yeah.
You were sitting in the video.
I sit in almost all of my videos. Yes.
Cool. So moving on to clip number 2. This is a Sarah clip from a video called The Shape of Ableism.
When I stated in the last video that it's impossible for an able actor to play a disabled character better than a disabled actor could, oh boy! Oh god! Did I get a lot of upset people. People who also seem to assume that I meant that if I were to just grab a random disabled person, that they would automatically be better than a trained actor would. Which would be absurd. Come with me if you want to be a star!
How did you get in my house?
But for clarity's sake, I was referring to actors who act. Yeah.
Okay, that clip was very funny. Let's start there. So I think the first thing I really want to talk about is like the video editing work that went into that. If you're listening to this podcast, which you are, if you're not, I have some other questions, but we can address those later. Please go watch that video clip because a lot of the humor is delivered through the video. But what all went into like editing the video to do all of the stuff that went there? Like, what was going through your head as you put that together?
So The Shape of Ableism is a part 2 video essay to a video that I had done earlier in the year called The Wonder of Disabled or Disfigured Representation. I'm embarrassed that I can't remember what it is now, but in that video I did sort of like, it was like 11 minutes long or something, and I really did a very kind of basic crash course about the concept of disfigurement as a as sort of this, as a community, as a marginalization, as like a marginalized identity that exists sort of within the disabled, but also like the body positive community, just because of the nature of it. And it's something that I didn't always know about, and I became aware of it because I started dating a woman who has a craniofacial, blanking on the word right now, but my girlfriend who is in that clip, Michaela Moody, has Cruzons, which is some sort of craniofacial condition. And we actually met because, and this is relevant, I promise, I'm not just going on a tangent. This is not just an ADHD tangent. We met because Beauty and the Beast is also, one of her favorite Disney films. And around the time that the movie was coming out that year, she wrote a thread about how you can read Beauty and the Beast as a disfigurement metaphor, and how, like, when she was a teenager watching Beauty and the Beast, it was something that had an impact on her because of that reading of the film. And that, the people who say things like, oh, it's a movie about bestiality and Stockholm Syndrome, are really missing out on the very queer subtext that is present in that movie, first of all, and also the sort of the disabled reading that you can put into it of somebody with an appearance, like literally whose appearance is like cursed and then is changed because of the fairy tale's ending. And it was basically that meme of like, ooh, Disney discourse I haven't heard before. And it was something that I had never, like, disfigurement was something that I had never really considered as being something in media that I really needed to be paying attention to. It was something that I had noticed, but I didn't know the term to put to it. So, like, things like the fact that a lot of, like, Disney villains or antagonistic forces are very ugly, frankly, and things like that, and how, like, in The Wizard of Oz, there's that very famous line of only bad witches are ugly, which Paige has a lot of feelings about Wizard of Oz. It was something that I really had never heard talked about in a formal setting, and so I made this part 1 video to kind of explain, like, the very basics of what goes into that kind of representation and how it also overlaps with disabled rep. So I talked about a movie called Wonder, which came out either in 2017 or 2016. I can't remember. And it's based on a book that you have probably seen in a Target. It is a blue book, and it's about this kid with a craniofacial condition who enters the school system for the first time at like 11. And he has to deal with the fact that, like, there are tons of kids his age in his school who have never seen a disfigured face and who don't know how to act around disability anyway. And then, for the kid, they cast Jacob Tremblay in prosthetics. And my girlfriend and a lot of other people in the disabled and disfigured community talked about, like, the importance of, like, representation, and how, like, disabled rep is already one of, like, the least represented things in media. And then you go a step further to, like, disfigured rep, and it's even worse. And so I made that video, and it was around the time that we got this big subscriber bump, and it got a lot more traffic than I was accustomed to getting on a video like that. And even though it's a very good video, that part 1, there were a lot of people who I think genuinely thought that I was advocating for forcing disabled people to act whether or not they wanted to in films.
That sounds like a bad faith interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't feel like they really thought that. I think they were just looking for a reason to be unhappy.
I was arguing that, like, we should try. And I also said something that a lot of people were really upset about. I said, a disabled actor will always give a better performance than an abled actor can. I said, like, it is impossible for an abled actor to give a more genuine performance than a disabled actor could. And I said actor in both of those times, and there were a ton of people who were like, so if I just grabbed a disabled person off the street, they'd do a better job than, like, an Oscar-winning actor. And I'm like, I never said a random person off the street. I never said that. And so the skit that we just watched in that clip is my girlfriend sitting there and us kind of just like, wouldn't it be ridiculous if I just barged into somebody's house and made them be in a film? Because that's what people thought I was saying.
Callbacks to 2 episodes ago, talking about the principles of satire. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, the continuity.
There were so many comments that I got so consistently on that part 1 as a response that a part 2 started to come about that is, like, twice as long and has about a quarter of the viewership of the first one, such is life. And a lot of it was very much shaped by the misconceptions that people had about like what I was saying in that first video. So that's why in the clip, there's also a lot of like, all of those are real comments. Every single thing that you see on the screen is a real comment that I grabbed. And boy, let me tell you, I could only do that for about 20 minutes scrolling through all those comments. It was intense. You know, that reminds me, a tip I would have for new people coming to the game, it is okay not to read all the comments. It is okay if you start to feel your energy just drain. It is okay, you are not obligated to read all of those just because. And if anybody tells you otherwise, ignore them. Your mental health is very important. But I collected all of those comments off of that first video, and a lot of them said the same sort of thing of, you know, it would be way too stressful for a child, a disabled child, to be in a movie because they would have people make fun of them, and the workload would just be too much. And I'm like, right, like, we don't already have child labor laws. Like, we don't already, like, work with actors to make sure that we are treating them ethically. Like, we don't already communicate with them so that they aren't forced to do anything that they don't want to do. In the case of this particular movie, Wonder, there was apparently a kid with, like, the same condition that the kid in the book was, like, based on. Like, the kid in the book didn't have, like, a named condition, but, like, the inspiration for it, they found a kid who had it, but it was apparently going to be too stressful for him to continue to do the role, according to his family. But there's also an extent to which we can't know how true that is and how much, was it the kid, was it the family? We don't know, and I'm not here to cast dispersions on that. It's more just that this isn't just a common practice for child actors, this is a common practice for just disability and disfigurement in general. The majority of this video was just shaped around the fact that there were about 4 original comments and then everybody else was the same thing. It was the same things over and over again. And a lot of the first half of the video is just based entirely on, I am going to answer your question because you asked.
So, Sarah, what do you think makes your videos for the channel unique and interesting?
I make longer ones. I mean, not necessarily. I think I touched on this earlier, but like, I do much like thicker essays. Like, that video is like 26 minutes long. I mean, it's a good video. Like, I tried really hard to make sure, like, at the end that I'm not including anything that's superfluous. My essays are tended more toward, like, I'm going to give you a complete experience. Like, this is an essay with a work cited and all that jazz. And Paige often does go more on thought. I guess I would just say that I make thicker videos, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does in fact make sense.
Paige, help.
Okay, I guess then let's move on to our final clip. This is a clip of both of you. This is a clip from P&S Watch, Descendants 2, which is a show or movie I have never heard of. Once again, link to the videos is in the comments.
Descendants is the Disney movie about, like, all the children of the Disney villains.
I didn't know that was the thing that happened. But, alright, cool. Let's watch this clip, or listen to this clip.
You should put me on the team.
No. We'll be the laughingstock of the league.
What?
Her mom is Mulan.
Don't do this, Chad! What is Chad doing there?
Just came to use your 3D printer.
How'd you get a key to my room?
Oh, I printed it off last time. You guys were sleeping.
I'm personally offended.
You'll be chillin', oh.
Chilling like a villain? Oh my god, no. I was kidding.
That guy could have been naked.
It's like that guy in Hercules. You wanna buy a
sundial?
Mel, I'm so sorry about our fight.
Mel, we had one fight and you left.
She has this giant mural of Evie. That's gay. Paige, I love you, but I'm probably like never gonna paint a giant mural of you on my wall.
I've seen you draw. I'm okay.
Excuse you.
Once again, a very funny clip. Wow, that show or movie was a lot, huh? Just from only those clips, I can tell that the source material there was a lot.
We liked the second one better.
Isn't there a third one?
It's happening
We are
this
so
year.
excited.
Yes. Yeah.
Impressive.
Very quickly, I promise. When I was putting the showcase together for this yesterday, and I watched through the Descendants 2 video, there's a part where Paige says, so it's basically like the plot of Bewitched, and she's trying to make sure that she's not and then I say witched, And she's like, yeah. And then a couple seconds later, she's like, ha, bewitched. And I cried with laughter for a good couple minutes.
We crack ourselves up.
I mean, you also cracked us up, so like, you earned it.
Yeah, I fully think that people should watch these full videos, including us, because we haven't actually seen these ones. We watched other videos on the channel.
I don't know if I have any like specific questions about that. I'm not sure if it being completely uncontexted helped or hurt, but wow, that was an experience. But tell me a little bit about like the production of your videos, especially with these ones where you have kind of a lot going on. What does like producing this sort of video look like?
Thankfully, those are ones that we do together, so we don't have to have all of the burden of making them on one person. But Sarah, for something like a PNS Watch video, Sarah and I will set up our lighting, set up our camera, and sit on a couch or a bed, and we just watch the movie and make running commentary like Mystery Science Theater 3000. And then we, take 100 years to edit those videos because they're like 2 hours long, and we have to get it under 20 to be comfortable with it. It takes a lot of time and energy to make those ones, especially because we have to sit through the whole movie. We did one for Barbie and the Nutcracker upon my suggestion, because I grew up watching Barbie and the Nutcracker, and it was far more boring than I remembered it being from when I was 6 years old.
I remember that movie.
So, yeah, exactly. So Sarah had never seen it, and I was very embarrassed and stubborn at the end, as I insisted that it was still a cinematic masterpiece, even though I knew clearly that it was not. But that was a long one, because there's just a lot of nothing happening for quite some time.
P&S Watch series, which the YouTube auto captions always wants to call it something else that I will not say, but it always does every single time.
We get comments about that too, and we're like,
yes,
it's unfortunate, but it's named that because of both the channel name and our names.
It's P&S.
Yes.
But like you said, it's something that came out of like a Mystery Science Theater 3000, which is, are you two familiar with that premise?
Of course, I don't think anyone isn't by this point.
That's a decent point. It has had a resurgence like since we started doing this. But it's something that has definitely evolved over the course of the last couple of years. We've gotten a lot better at doing them. And again, I would say that like lighting is the biggest thing, but they are the most difficult to edit. Paige is right, because it's about 2 hours of footage. And we also try to do a little quip at the beginning that's fun. We have to think about before or after. It's a lot of footage that can get corrupted, which is what has happened to the last two that we've done. We watched a decom called Zombies, which was a movie. It was a lot. And we watched Cats Don't Dance, and unfortunately both of the files got corrupted, or they were on a hard drive that got dropped. And there's a lot that goes into the setup and takes a lot of time to edit. We're hoping to do one this month, though, and it will be the first time that we've done it in a year. But we love it. We've been doing it since the beginning. It's just that it takes significantly more effort than doing something like the other two videos you saw. But I love them. They're always really, really funny.
They're always well worth the effort. They just are a lot of effort.
Like this podcast.
Yeah.
Please support our Patreon.
We're close, so we're just talking about it more because we really want to make that special episode.
So, okay, let's move on to our listener questions. So for every episode of this podcast, we take questions from you, our listeners, for us or for our guests. If you want to ask questions for our future episodes, you can do so on our Twitter at STRQueercast, via email at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, or in our community Discord at bit.ly/STRQcord. So we had just one question this week from Amelia in Discord, who asks, Elsa GF reveal when?
No, Amelia asks, Elsa GF reveal when? It's in all caps. Anyway, Elsa or GF reveal when? When? You have the answers, apparently, according to Amelia in our Discord.
I guess.
This was the only question we got this week, so you need to answer it.
When, doesn't the second movie come out in November? Did I imagine
Well, we're getting Frozen 2 this year.
So, I don't have a lot of faith in
So
Disney.
what you're saying is you're promising that will be in the sequel. That's what I'm interpreting your statement as. If this doesn't happen, we can blame you personally, right? Okay, anyway,
Paige
before you have a chance
personally,
to...
yes.
Me personally, sure.
Yeah, let's move on before you have a chance to defend yourself. So it's time to move into our final segment of the podcast, which is Kaylee's question of the week, which is, you know, the sort of thing that you might find like on the back of a cereal box if you were to actually rip the cereal box in half and reassemble the pieces in such a way to form the question exactly.
Very high quality cereal.
It's actually high quality, so yes.
I love your questions. I love this section of the podcast.
Anyway, if you were a Disney princess, what would your movie be about?
Well, obviously, mine is like a speedrunning success story. Well, success story, maybe I get like turned into a frog until I can get a new PB in NES Metroid or something, which would be really difficult as a frog. Need like a tiny frog-sized NES controller.
The Princess and the Mother Brain.
I love it. Disney, hire me.
Gosh, I really should have thought of this one, considering that I thought of this question 3 weeks ago. I didn't even think of an answer this time around, but it's okay, because I can cut this. Mine would just be about, like, the nap princess, I think, who just lies around in bed, and takes, like, an hour, takes a 90-minute nap that you watch in real time.
Well, how does it come around to that, like, heartwarming romantic ending?
Her girlfriend wakes her up and is like, "Were you sleeping this whole time?"
Oh, so this is like the spin-off movie to my movie then.
Yeah, you just come home afterwards and you were like, "Were you sleeping this whole time?" And then I'm like, "Well,
I got turned into a frog. Did you see none of this?
Sorry, I guess my alarm didn't sound."
Disney, hire us.
I was just telling my mom that there aren't any good Hanukkah movies, so just by virtue of me being Jewish, it's going to be a Hanukkah movie about a Hanukkah princess.
Yes.
Excuse you, there's Rugrats Hanukkah.
Okay, that's exactly what my mom said, though, so apparently it's the truth.
3/4 of the people on this podcast are Jewish.
Yeah.
And we all watch Rugrats Hanukkah all the time.
Of course, I've definitely seen that.
You haven't seen that?
I've definitely seen that.
Okay, we're watching Rugrats Hanukkah, but...
Oh no.
There's also a Rugrats Passover.
There is.
I would say Beauty and the Beast, but gay, but that's boring.
Okay, have you considered Beauty and the Beast, but really gay?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so we're going deeper.
Yes.
I'm ready. Lay it on me.
I want gay Beauty and the Beast, but princess is disfigured and I'm the Beast.
And Howard Ashman's ghost is there.
Definitely not motivated by my own life.
Fantastic. All around well done, gang. We really heckin' did it. Disney, hire us. We've got a full season's run worth of content for you right here on this podcast.
You joke, but we have ideas.
Did I joke, though? All right, well, with that, I think it's time we wrap this classical Disney love story up and end it just like every Disney princess movie ends, where the Disney princess plugs her Instagram account. So, you two, where can the good listener base of Setting the Record Queer find your videos and find you two all over the internet and such?
Well, we are The Princess and the Scrivener on YouTube. My Instagram is Paige the Princess, but there's no vowels in princess. I believe it's the same for Twitter. I think so.
And mine is Sarah the Scrivener. Search on Twitter or Instagram, you will find me under that, but my handle is Sarah the Scrivener because one time someone left a comment and misspelled it very badly, so I just changed all my social media handles. That's SCIRVNR.
It has like a uniquely distinct mouthfeel from the source material, but it's still a good one. That's right, we're wrapping this back around, baby. You thought I had forgotten about the mouthfeel, but no, I had not.
God, if only we could cut the podcast here. Anyway, go give our standard outro stuff.
Yeah, so thank you two so much for being on this podcast. This was great. Technology tried to stop us, Technology tried to stop us. It really did, but we did not let it through the sheer power of will and musical numbers that got cut, of course. They definitely really happened. They were amazing. If you liked this podcast, maybe you'll consider supporting us on Patreon. We've already talked about our goal of pushing it to $100 a month so that we can hire an editor and spend more time making the podcast content. At $100, we're going to be making a special episode, and it'll be really cool. And patrons will get an early look at what that's going to be as soon as we start making it. But besides just that, all of our patrons can get early guest reveals, access to a special patrons-only Discord channel, high-quality or early episode releases, and even special thanks on the podcast. We'd like to thank our $25 patrons, Kadeho, who you can find on Twitter as at Calmy Cadejo. And American Choir Boy, who you can find streaming on Twitch as American Choir Boy. Otherwise, if you like this podcast, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, leave a review, tell a friend, recommend us on your social media. If you want to talk to us and send us your feedback or what have you, you can do so. We're on Twitter at STRQueercast. We're at email. No, that's not how that works.
Good job.
We're at email at settingtherecordqueer@gmail.com, and you can't stop me. Or maybe join our community Discord where you can hang out with your hosts, fellow Setting the Record Queer listeners, and even some of Setting the Record Queer's guests who've decided to grace us with their presence at bit.ly/STRQcord, all lowercase. While you're there, ask questions for us or for our guests, give us your feedback. Maybe you have an idea of who or what could be on this podcast. Maybe you think you'd be a good fit for this podcast. Please reach out to us. The logo for this podcast was drawn by Cubotic. That's at QBTIC on Twitter, or Cobot, QOBOT.tumblr.com. Theme music for this show was written by Thrill Me Music. You can find more information about her work at thrillmemusic.squarespace.com. This podcast was edited by Kaylee and produced by yours truly, Alexis. Kaylee, where can the good people find you?
People can find me on Twitter at WitchesHex, that's WITCHS Hex, or on Twitch at the same name, but with an underscore between Witches and Hex.
And you can find me on Twitch and YouTube as Proto Magical Girl, or Twitch at proto.ml, and Twitter and Instagram as Princess Proto. Our favorite answer to last week's Kaylee's question of the week, which was, what animation style would you replace real life with, came from Propagable in Discord, who said, I would replace IRL with claymation, specifically beginner claymation, where they have yet to figure out how to animate smoothly and what the key poses they should focus on are yet. Our next episode is going to be about special effects makeup artistry. That's all for this edition, this Disney love story of Setting the Record Queer. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.